Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a certified yoga teacher, ordained minister, kirtan artist, human being, amongst other things. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about how the ego cuts both ways. But before I do that, I do want to thank everyone on Patreon who makes these talks possible by making a financial contribution monthly. I want to thank those who make one-time donations or occasional donations via PayPal, Venmo, and I want to thank everybody who subscribes, likes, comments, shares on YouTube. If you'd like to take part in that, please check out the links below, or if you're on YouTube, you know what to do. Thumbs up, subscribe, comment, share. All right, so today we're talking about the ego, a very important topic in spirituality if we are going to decrease or perhaps eliminate our suffering and really enjoy a fulfilled human experience, living heaven or bringing heaven to earth. So this to me is what the spiritual path is really about. Other teachers might teach or share other things, but for me this is really what spirituality is about. So I was having a conversation with someone, and this was not someone unfamiliar with spirituality or the spiritual path, or they were a very awake individual and they've been on the path for several years. But I was speaking about ego, and I was saying how someone who is repressed is under the sway of the ego, as well as someone who's kind of overblown. And they seemed very surprised by this information, so I thought it would make a good talk, because usually if I'm speaking to one person and they have a question or they learn something from a comment, then that usually means there are other people out there who can benefit as well. So if we use the word ego, oh, they're such an egomaniac, right? In our culture, we're usually thinking of someone with a kind of overblown personality very often. We're often thinking of someone who's drawing attention to themselves, who maybe doesn't consider other people's feelings and is just willing to kind of bulldoze over other people to get what they want. And indeed, those can be examples of ego behavior, no question about it. But what may be less obvious is the person who's the wallflower, the person who is afraid to speak up, the person who is afraid to set healthy boundaries, the quiet person, the agreeable person, the mousy person. This is someone who is equally or possibly more under the influence of the ego as the big overblown personality is. In fact, I don't know that an overblown big personality means someone has a big ego. That might just be a personality trait. Ego is a little more nuanced than that. Likewise, someone can naturally be quiet and withdrawn. That doesn't automatically mean that they are suffering from the ego. The question is always repression when it comes to that withdrawn person. So let me try and explain this. Most of us are a mix. We're a mix of what humans would call good and bad. In reality, my experience, there isn't really good and bad. There's good and bad for society. There's good and bad for individuals, or there's good and bad for, say, relationship dynamics. There's good and bad for parenting, right? You may have certain qualities that make you a great mom, but you probably also have qualities that make you a bad mom. That's the reality of it. That's the truth of it. Likewise, I might have qualities that make me a great partner, but I probably also have qualities that make me a terrible partner. This is the reality of it, right? We all love to think, no, 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 not me. I'm different, I'm special, I'm perfect. But that again is the ego. So if that's really what we believe about ourselves, chances are we're listening to our ego. And we know somewhere deep inside that that's not true. And usually that leads to what we call defensiveness. So if I were to be talking with you and you say, oh, no, no, I'm the perfect partner, and I question that, if you get really upset when I question that, chances are that means, again, that you know somewhere deep inside that that's not really true. Otherwise, if we don't really believe that, then we might be like, oh, well, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not such a great partner. There tends to be less reactivity and openness when it isn't actually the ego defending itself, okay? So keep that in mind, because that could be a good sign. If we're willing to entertain the idea or look at the idea, then it means usually that it's at least not the ego that's in charge there. So somebody who has a very withdrawn, quiet, what's the word I'm looking for? Accommodating person. Don't we all love somebody like that? Of course we do, because we get what we want, right? Now, I'm not going to say everyone loves that, because, again, some people would find someone like that boring. They might like someone who's much more gregarious, someone who's much louder. They might be drawn to that kind of a environment. But a lot of people are going to like someone who is accommodating, someone who maybe is like, well, I'll do whatever you want to. What do you want to do? I'll do whatever you want to do. They just sort of always go along with whatever you want. And chances are, like I said, we each have sort of the good and bad within us. We each have yin and yang. And so while it may be true that you don't have many wants or desires, or a lot of times you don't care about things, sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. And I'm not saying there's one size fits all. Some people will have more demands, others will have less. But in general, we all have some. We also all have boundaries where, you know, we're getting out of what we feel is authentic for ourselves or true for ourselves, or what we're willing to do for another authentically. Sure, someone can twist our arm and we might be willing to go further, but if all other things were being equal, if there were no repercussions, if we weren't going to feel guilty or bad, if we weren't going to get punished later, you know, where's our kind of authentic boundary for our interactions with somebody? Now, most of us go through some form of, what's the word I'm looking for? Domestication is the best word I can think of. Just like you might domesticate an animal or a pet, most of us, when we're little, we're domesticated to a greater or lesser degree. If you want to learn a little more about that, a wonderful book I recommend is The 4 Agreements. This is such a treasure of a book. Anyway, most of us get domesticated during our childhood when we're very weak, when we're very small, and the repercussions of disobeying the bigger, stronger people around us is very often actual physical harm. Maybe not permanent damage, but, you know, a parent that's spanking you, I mean, they're doing physical harm to you. Again, it may not create permanent damage, but they're definitely physically abusing you. Now, they'll often say, well, that's for your own good. Maybe. I haven't really thought a lot about it. Something makes me think that it's probably not the best idea. But again, I haven't thought a lot about it, and I haven't had a lot of experience parenting myself. I know that I was definitely hit as a child quite a bit. And when I was growing up, that was somewhat normal. I think these days it's frowned upon, but it is questionable whether or not parenting has actually improved or not. That's not, for me, a foregone conclusion. But I think coercing people using physical violence is usually not the best way to get people to do what you want. Anyway, regardless of that, that is not the subject of our talk today. What I think you'll find is that most children, whether it's through physical violence, threat of physical violence, threat of having certain things withheld, like phone privileges, devices, television, food, dessert. We have all kinds of ways, right? Through one of these means, we're often taught that elements of our own personality, things that we desire, things that we want, boundaries that we want to place, we're very often told or communicated in some way. And again, I want to be very clear here. This isn't people being evil. This isn't some kind of conspiracy. This isn't your parents being part of the patriarchy. This is just, it tends to just happen. Maybe there's a way we can learn to parent more enlightened and this can stop happening. I don't know. That is an open-ended question as far as I'm concerned. What I'm talking about is what tends to happen. Whether or not this can be avoided or if someone is to blame, that to me is unclear. Okay, so I want to be very clear about that. Before you go calling your parents and telling them what a terrible job they did the best job that they could. Okay, so the tendency is no one that I'm aware of gets through childhood unscathed. In fact, it may just be a part of being a human child, that you will, in a sense, traumatize yourself. The people around you will just be who they are, and they will be doing the best job they can, but you will interpret as a innocent, scared, helpless child, you will interpret certain things in a certain way. So again, I want to be very clear. This is not about blaming parents or blaming adults or whatever. This is just, I'm trying to report as clearly as possible on what tends to happen to us as a child. So as we're growing up, we start to display different aspects of our personality, of, in the yoga tradition we might say, vasanas, these sort of karmic traces from other lives. I don't care how you think about it. You can think of it as genetic or epigenetic expression. Does not matter to me. I'm not really concerned with that. But you will begin to display your unique individuality. And what will happen is the people around you will begin to show approval and disapproval. They will approve of certain aspects of your personality that you're displaying, and they will disapprove of others. And again, they're not being evil or bad. Now, some people, some parents, some teachers, some siblings, some friends, some bullies may go a step beyond that, right? And they might physically abuse you, they might verbally abuse you. So that can happen too. So I'm not saying that everybody is completely innocent. There may have been people who played a role in really creating severe damage. But even if there wasn't, even if everyone around you was very kind and loving and as patient as they could be, chances are you still will emerge with some of this trauma and repression. As a result, you will just interpret certain things as disapproval as much as those around you may have tried to just set, again, boundaries for themselves of what was, as a child, you might have needed love at a certain moment, but your parent might have been involved in something that didn't allow them to give you the love that you felt at that moment. And as a very young, innocent child, an unconscious belief might have formed, well, since my parent isn't willing to give me love when I really need it, I must be unlovable. And I'll be clear, this is usually not conscious. So if you're like, well, I don't remember ever believing that or thinking that, yeah, you probably don't. And to this day, you probably don't. And so usually this is unconscious, which means it's below your conscious awareness, which is why you're not aware of it, right? If we didn't have that, life would be so much easier. But so much of our behavior is dictated by the unconscious. I think modern science says about 94% of your day is dictated by these kind of unconscious thoughts. So you can take that or leave that, but that's my understanding. So we grow up, and generally what most of us do, not everybody, and not everybody to the same degree, but to a greater or lesser degree, we learn what parts of ourselves seem acceptable, what parts of ourselves seem to be celebrated, right? We might display certain characteristics and people say, oh my God, you're so helpful. I love you. You're mom's little helper, your dad's little helper. Unlike your brother and your sister. Oh, you are just such a little angel. And again, that will release all kinds of feel-good chemicals. It will positively reinforce something that might have been genuine inside of us, but now we might display that even more than is natural for us. So it does work in two ways. So that's one way where we can start overcompensating and overblowing parts of ourselves that maybe at a certain point we just don't feel like helping, but we help anyway. I've literally had students and friends over the years who have literally made themselves sick trying to help others, and yet they wouldn't take the time to help themselves, and they weren't willing to say no or to not go out of their way to help someone else so that they could take care of themselves. This is how much this is driven by fear, unfortunately, because they're afraid that if they stop helping or they stop whatever this behavior that has made them, gotten them that positive feedback, if they stop displaying this, they won't get the love that they need, right? That people withdraw their love. So that's one aspect of it. But the aspect that is really relevant for today's talk is where we repress elements of ourselves that are not approved of. So this is, again, where someone can have this very withdrawn, approving, quiet, I only say what is popular, I only say what people are going to agree with, publicly at least. These sorts of things. And again, on the outside, this might look like someone is just the most wonderful person. Oh, they're so agreeable. They always say yes to everything. They're always there helping. What a wonderful person, right? But no one that I know of is authentically that way. There might be people who are that way, but again, that was domestication. That was that they learned in their home life, growing up. That's how they learned to get love, approval, appreciation, and to navigate that environment, which may have been very hostile. Some of us grow up in very, very hostile environments. So again, this isn't blaming the victim. This is about awareness, okay? So none of this is meant to make you feel guilty or bad or like you're doing it wrong, anything like that. This is here to help you identify what might be going on with you. So, the point of today's talk is to hopefully, for those of you for which this might be news, to again reevaluate how we see the ego. Because the person who is the loud, boisterous, doesn't seem to give a damn about anyone else is obviously what we call an ego, right? An overblown, they've got such an ego, they're an egomaniac. That's obvious to us. What might be less obvious is the wallflower, the person who always says yes, the person who's always there when you need them, the person who doesn't set healthy boundaries, who never says, yeah, no, I don't think so, I'm not up for it. Whatever it might be, the person who won't ask for what she feels she needs or wants even, who's afraid to do that. That is not someone who is ego-less. This is someone who, again, is as much under the sway of the ego, or perhaps even more under the sway of the ego than the other extreme, okay? There at least can be equal. So if that describes you, and it might, because I think very often the person who's the big overblown personality, very often they're not drawn to spirituality. But it seems to me in my experience that very often the person who's more quiet, the more calm person, the person who learned to be a good little boy or girl, and who's been very well domesticated, this is the kind of person who is more likely to be drawn to spirituality like this teaching. And so chances are, if you're watching this video, what I'm saying might actually apply more to you. And so the term for this, again, is repression. You have learned to repress, to tamp down, to hide from your conscious mind aspects of your authentic self. Now, I'm not telling you to become impulsive. I'm not telling you to start doing and saying everything that comes to mind, that is somehow more spiritual. But spirituality, in my experience, is about awareness. So we have to be willing to understand ourselves and know the different aspects of ourselves. We can't go through life completely ignorant of our authentic urges, our authentic boundaries, our authentic needs and wants. We want to be aware of these. Now, how we deal with them or how we handle them or how we present them, that's another issue, okay? So again, this is not saying that you need to now find this stuff and just start blurting out the first thing that comes to your mind, and then that's authentic or that's not being repressed or anything like that. No. But we do have to be aware of these repressed energies, these repressed emotions, these repressed thoughts. We have to bring them into conscious awareness. So the point of today's talk is just sort of this overall idea of that the ego cuts both ways. Again, in our culture, I think there's a tendency to talk about the ego as though it's always this big, loud, obnoxious thing, and that someone who is quiet, who is accommodating, who is kind, is not someone suffering from the ego. But I'm here to tell you that is incorrect. Is someone who's kind, accommodating, all the rest, someone who I'd rather hang out with? Absolutely. Are they easier to deal with? Absolutely. Do they make a better citizen? Probably, right? They're easier to control, easier to put into groups of people. They're not going to be wandering off on their own. But again, spirituality is not about creating an ideal society. It's not about fitting into society. It's not about being anything to anyone. Not society, not your parents, not your partner. Okay, it's not about trying to please anybody or any institution or any group. It is about understanding your true self, which transcends this authentic self that I'm talking about. So, your true self is what I would call spirit or awareness. That transcends all this stuff that I'm talking about today. Okay? This sort of authenticness that shows up with this package. This package is not the true self. And even the authentic self, what I'll call the authentic self, the authentic personality that sort of comes with this package, that still is not the true self, the transcendent, the eternal. And this is what yoga is really ultimately about. This is about getting in touch with that side of ourselves. But as we do that, part of the challenge is how does that spirit, how does that animate and manifest in the world? And what we generally find is what we'll call the ego is something that represses and amplifies the way that that authentic expression comes through. It distorts it, okay? It distorts it. So again, it will amplify certain aspects. Parents, culture will say, that's good, do more of that. And as we get older, it might say, we'll pay you more if you display more of that, but you may not want to. That might be more than you are wanting to do. And then the opposite is also true. You will have aspects where you'll be told, if you stop doing that, we will reward you. If you stop doing that, we will love you. If you stop doing that, you will stop being punished, right? If you keep doing that, we will punish you. We will tell you we don't love you. We will do whatever it might be, okay? And part of really learning to allow spirit to come through very often is at least partly involved with getting rid of those distortions. So again, how do I navigate my culture, my partner, my family, my community? That's going to be a very moment-to-moment thing, right? How do I stay authentic and true to what spirit is wanting to express through this form? Because it's trying to express itself through this form. It loves this just as it is. It's not like society where some of it is good and some of it is bad. It just loves what's happening, okay? And it wants to express itself. But how can it do that authentically and also still love the whole? And this isn't something that there's a simple, easy answer to. This is the challenge that we really take up when we step on this path, okay? So I don't want to make it sound like there's some simple answer. Getting out of repression also is a journey. It is a path. It is something that takes time. It is not a one and done. We might find we come out of repression in certain aspects of our life, and yet there are other aspects where we're still repressing. And remember, another word for that is just distortion. That the light of awareness is trying to shine through this form, through these words, through these actions, through this life path, and society, parents, siblings, friends, children, environment, all of these things will have distorted that along the way. And again, is there a way for us to raise children where that doesn't happen? I don't honestly know. I don't know. Maybe. But if there is, I don't know what it is. And to be honest with you, anyone who says that they know, I don't think they know what they're talking about, to be honest. So I think we're not there yet. Maybe one day we can get there. But I'm very skeptical of anyone who says that they have the answer. So it is a challenge. And this may just be part of the human path, is we grow up, that authentic self gets distorted. It's part of growing. I know that Joseph Campbell, who I'm a big fan of, I think he said more or less that, this is just part of growing up, that happens along the way. But then once we're an adult, we have to sort of re-educate ourselves to have a second birth, right? A rebirth, a spiritual birth, where we're willing to love those parts of ourselves that maybe our culture or our parents weren't able to accept or love, or were afraid to accept or love. At least we can accept and love those parts of ourselves. And then again, by doing that, we can perhaps learn how to be true to ourselves and authentic to ourselves, and yet still live in harmony with others. All right, so as always, my intention is that by sharing this, it will be of value to you at some point on your journey. Again, if you'd like to help support this work and this community, please check out the links below, check out the Patreon, check out my webpage. Until next time, everyone, namaste, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.